This is what I call a cheating wife horror story. I never expected my life would turn upside down after 11 years of marriage. Looking back, the signs were there, but I refused to see them. Sometimes people do ignore red flags. My wife and I met at a fair. She was a friend of a friend, so to speak. While at the fair, we rode a couple of rides together and just started chatting, and the rest was history. 8 months later, we were engaged, and within a year, married. Look, I am not against people falling fast for each other, but to me, that's a little too soon. That's just me personally. The first 9 years were good. Not perfect, but good enough that I never questioned her commitment. Then things started to change. It began with late nights at work that came out of nowhere. She'd always been home by 6, but suddenly she was rolling in at 10 or 11. Now that's a huge red flag. If someone is cheating on you, that's one of the most telling signs. Her routine and timing has changed. The vague explanation about impressing new management at the publishing house never fully made sense. Our weekend plans started getting canceled at the last minute. The emergency with the manuscript excuse became too common to believe. I noticed she'd take her phone to the bathroom, something she'd never did before. When she'd return, I'd catch a hint of guilt in her expression. Then came the weekend trip with her girlfriends that she never discussed with me. I called her office on a hunch, just to check in, and was told she had taken personal days. The pit in my stomach grew deeper when I found a receipt for dinner at a restaurant on a night she claimed to be working late. My wife paid in cash, and my wife never paid in cash. His wife is sloppy, for the simple reason he found the receipt, and she tried to use cash as a cover. I found myself checking her location, something I never thought I'd do, only to discover she turned that feature off. The battery-saving excuse didn't add up. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, but the evidence was mounting, and my gut was screaming that something wasn't right. One night, I woke up at 1 a.m. and my wife wasn't in bed. I walked through our dark house to find her in the living room, whispering into her phone. When she saw me, she jumped, quickly ending the call. The work excuse at 1 a.m. was the breaking point. That was the moment I knew I needed help figuring out what was happening. I couldn't keep living in doubt. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I started researching private investigators. I wasn't going to beat around the bush, so I called a private investigator. Even though private investigators are expensive in most cases, but in the long run, they will save you thousands of dollars. The private investigator, a retired cop, met me at a coffee shop away from our neighborhood. I told him everything. I gave him the address of her job, who she hangs with, and what time she left work. He simply nodded, mentioning seeing similar cases daily, and slid a contract across the table. I signed the papers, feeling like I was betraying my wife just by being there. But I needed the truth more than I needed comfort. The waiting was the worst part. Each day I'd wake up wondering if today would bring answers. Each night I'd lie next to her, staring at her, wondering if I even knew who she was anymore. A week passed with no updates from the private investigator. Then 2, my wife continued her pattern of late nights and vague explanations. I tried to act normal, but found myself analyzing every expression, every gesture. The tension in our house grew thicker but remained unspoken. The romantic and affectionate touches that once defined our relationship had disappeared. We moved around each other like ghosts, occupying the same space but somehow never connecting. Finally, the private investigator called. At the same coffee shop, he placed a folder on the table but kept his hand firmly on top of it. With a questioning look, he waited for my confirmation before revealing the contents. Inside were photos of my wife entering hotels, restaurants, and bars, always with different men. 6 of them he had identified so far. Each followed a pattern. The timestamps, locations, and phone records he'd somehow obtained painted a clear picture. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was an entirely second life. That night, I watched my wife prepare dinner as if nothing was wrong. I observed her movements, searching for signs of the woman who visited hotels with strangers. She must have felt my stare, as she kept glancing nervously in my direction. The meal passed in uncomfortable silence. Later, she tried to initiate intimacy for the first time in months. I made an excuse about not feeling well. Good choice. I wouldn't have slept with her either. But in some cases, this is where some men mess up. Something in her eyes showed relief rather than disappointment. I told the private investigator to keep digging. 3 more days passed in a fog of betrayal and pretending. I went through the motions of our marriage like an actor in a play. Then the PI called again with news that there was more to discover. And it was worse than we thought. The PI's new evidence hit me like a freight train. He tracked my wife to a private medical facility across town, one that specialized in reproductive health. Through methods I didn't want to know about, he'd confirmed she had undergone an abortion 3 months ago. We hadn't been intimate in nearly a year, her constant excuse being exhaustion from work. Nearly a year? As I said before, I will not clown a man for being betrayed, but some of this is on him, mainly not paying attention to those red flags. You have to pay attention. The child wasn't mine, and she never told me. I sat in my car for hours after meeting the private investigator, unable to drive, unable to think clearly. The person I married, the person I trusted with everything, was a stranger. When I finally made it home, I went straight to our bathroom and locked the door. I called my doctor and scheduled an STD test for the next morning. I couldn't even look at her during dinner. She noticed my distance, pushing a note across the table asking what was wrong. I ignored it, focusing on my food without tasting a single bite. The test results came back positive for chlamydia. This is one of the main reasons not to take back a cheating wife or husband. They can possibly bring home a disease you can't get rid of. Thankfully, it was treatable, but the damage to my trust was terminal. The PI's final report was comprehensive and devastating. 6 different men over the span of 2 years. Hotel receipts, text message logs, video footage of her entering and leaving various locations. The PI and I had already come to the conclusion that the visit to that health facility was probably to get an abortion. There were credit card statements showing purchases that were suspicious, but I had an idea of what was up, buying lingerie and other clothes that I never saw her wear. I sat with this knowledge for a full day, trying to process it, trying to understand how the woman I love could lead such an elaborate double life. I went through old photos looking for clues I might have missed. Had she always been this person? Had I been blind from the beginning? Or had something changed along the way? I'll never know. What I did know was that I couldn't stay married to a woman who would cheat on me like this. Someone who could risk my health without a second thought. Someone who could terminate a pregnancy without even telling me it existed. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. I gathered all the evidence a private investigator had provided. I prepared myself for the confrontation that would end my marriage. 11 years together, finished. A future I had planned, erased. Trust I had given freely, shattered beyond repair. The divorce attorney, a woman who had a no-nonsense attitude, reviewed the private investigator's evidence with clinical detachment. She confirmed I was in a strong position legally. I wasn't thinking about positions or advantages. I just wanted out. Yeah, this is the attitude of some men in a marriage that's ending. They just want out. They don't care about anything else. I wanted the nightmare to end. That night, I waited until my wife came home from another late meeting before I gave her an envelope labeled "For You." The photos, the medical records, the STD results. She walked in at 11:30 p.m., her lipstick slightly smudged, reeking of alcohol. Her eyes widened when I gave her the envelope and stood there in the living room while she opened it. The shock on her face confirmed everything. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, but I raised my hand to stop any explanations. Nothing she could say would matter now. The color drained from her face as she flipped through the photos. 6 men, 2 years of lies, 1 secret abortion, and STD. The facts spoke for themselves. Then I picked up another set of papers from the living room table. which were the divorce papers along with the pen. She stared at them, then at me. This woman did not shed a tear. I pointed to the signature line. She tried to touch my arm, but I stepped back. No contact, no explanations, no second chances. She signed the papers with shaking hands. I had already packed her essential belongings. There were 4 suitcases waiting for her. She looked at them, then back at me. Realization dawning that this was truly the end. No dramatic speeches, no begging, just a quiet death of what I thought had been a good marriage. She took the suitcases and left. I even helped her load them into her car. I changed the locks the next day. The divorce process was surprisingly quick. With the evidence I had, her lawyer advised her to settle. Within 3 months, it was final. 11 years of marriage dissolved by a judge's signature. People ask if I'm bitter. I'm not. I'm grateful I found out before we had children together. Grateful I discovered who she really was before wasting more years. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever trust again, if I'll ever let someone close enough to hurt me. But those thoughts come less frequently now. I'm rebuilding, I'm healing, and I'm learning that while trust is fragile, so is deception. The truth finds its way to the surface eventually. I just wish it hadn't taken a private investigator, 6 affairs, a secret abortion, and an STD to get there. But at least now I'm free. Well, all I have to say about OP is he, like so many of us, will overlook red flags because we love someone. And sometimes that can come back to bite you.